shot.
All right, here we go. Another true Brew Bobcast at the end of Détente Road here in Cafe Détente. Have a wonderful guest with me. We've been trying to meet for a minute now. Dr. Francesco
Crocco.
Okay, he just won the coolest name award in the podcast history so far. Welcome.
All right.
Can we go with Dr. Frank for the deal?
Yeah, you can just call me Frank. That's fine.
Okay. Is that cool?
That's
all right,
cool.
Good. Well, how did your first latte turn out?
It's fabulous. I didn't know I was so good at making these. I'm kidding. Thank you for teaching me.
Well, Frank, thanks for coming on, man. And I originally tracked Frank down for his work with Move the Mindset. And if you don't mind, can we start the podcast off to talk about that a little bit? I know you don't want to talk about the future part.
Yeah,
okay. So perhaps a good place to start, I'll listen to a interview or whatever with Miss Ola Prejean. She sounds fascinating. And you had mentioned the story about you coming to town and you and your kids would run around downtown and you discover this statue of General Mouton, and that sort of got something moving on you. Can we start the story there?
Sure. Yeah, I had just so I'm not from here. I moved to Lafayette in 2015, and a couple months later, this was in July. So right around this time, about 9 years ago, I took my kids to Carpe Diem to get some ice cream. And as we're getting ice cream, I looked outside the window and I noticed the statue. So I said, kids, let's go check out the statue. We walked out there and they're eating their ice cream, and I was reading the inscription and the plaque, and I was kind of horrified, actually. Being from the North, grew up in New Jersey, I'd never seen a Confederate statue close up. And I guess I just assumed they'd all been taken down, the civil rights movement and whatnot. I figured that this stuff wouldn't survive that because of the, I assume it's offensive, especially to African Americans, but also to anyone who is opposed to slavery, opposed to what the Confederacy stood for. So, yeah, I had a pretty strong reaction to it. And I decided to, I felt very strongly that it needed to come down, but I didn't know anything about it, so I decided to do some research. So I went home that day and did some research on the internet, and I found an article written about Freetown. It was, I think it was written by Ray Brasseur and other folks at UL Lafayette. I didn't really even know anyone at UL Lafayette at the time, and
The Moutons gave that property to him, right?
correct. So yeah, so as I that night I read the article, and it went into the history of the Mouton family because Freetown was part of the Mouton plantation, and it went all the way back to Jean Mouton and the founding of Vermilionville, and then, how the Mouton, kind of built their fortune and whatnot, and power and influence. And then Alexander Mouton, his son, became the first local governor, and also presided over the secession of Louisiana from the Union. And mentioned his son Alfred, who was depicted in the statue, and that he had gone to West Point and then come back and served I think he ran sort of a local militia. But also it mentioned that he led essentially a vigilante group that his father had established. And this group they used to kind of punish their enemies, track down runaway slaves, punish any white folks who helped slaves, even kind of pursue personal interests and so on, and they did so with impunity. So the more I read, the more I kind of became determined, like this person and this cause, neither one of these things should be, commemorated and celebrated downtown. The statue stands right at the entrance to the downtown area. So I went back and I kind of walked around the grounds a few days later, and I realized, what it is that it stands in front of. It's currently the headquarters of the center. What is it? No, I'm blanking.
I know where
Kind of
it's
international
Old City
center.
Hall.
But it's a place where the city greets
Yeah.
international connections of all types, right? Folks from the diaspora. And upstairs was the headquarters of the Downtown Development Authority. So it's like a pretty key area. And I did some more research, and I found out it was the old city hall, And the statue actually went up before that building became the city hall, but it stood in front of City Hall for decades. And yeah, it was kind of an eye-opening introduction to the history of this city.
So were you offended as an American? Were you offended? I mean, where was the core of your emotions coming from?
To be honest, I was offended for my fellow citizens. I felt that, especially African Americans, that it was an affront to all that they had fought for to achieve equality. That despite all that, there was still a statue prominently displayed downtown celebrating someone who owned slaves, who fought on behalf of the cause of slavery, and as I read more, I found out that the statue was really connected to the Jim Crow movement, because it doesn't come up during after the Civil War. It comes up, they put it up 50 years later. The Daughters of the Confederacy put it up in a time in which the Lost Cause movement was gaining, strength, and Jim Crow had become the law of the land as a result of separate but equal legislation, right? And it was sort of, kind of sticking the thumb in the eye of those who had fought for the rights of all people in the country to be free, right? But now we're going back to essentially a legalized form of slavery yet again. Yeah, there were just so many layers to it. I felt an affront as a citizen. I felt that this was sort of the dark side of the nation, and why should this be what is celebrated? I felt bad for the city itself. I didn't see why we wanted this to represent the city. As international visitors arrive and are greeted, this is the message that they encounter. It just felt so backwards and so disrespectful on so many levels. And the more, I spoke with lots of people about it. I remember asking people at the cafe what they felt. And, what I got a lot was nobody noticed it. It was just ignored.
That was a question I was going to have. When does it turn into just an old relic of some old dude on a statue that nobody's really taken notice to as something days gone by? Because I would imagine if you did a polling, I think a large majority of the people would have felt similar, but it was beyond that. It was still, symbolism was still present.
I can't remember when, the movement to take down Confederate statues really took off. I don't remember if it was before 2015 or 2016. But there was definitely a growing sense that the symbolism needed to change, that these symbolic statues were important. That hadn't arrived yet on the shores of Lafayette, right? The people that I asked about it, They either didn't notice it, or if they did, they didn't know what it was. A lot of people thought it was a statue of General Mouton, the founder of the city. Um, Nobody bothered to read the inscription. Nobody cared anymore. It was this kind of sleepy corner of the town. Even though it was the downtown, really at that point still wasn't really coming alive except for like the festivals and so on. And that was actually one of the things I noticed is that like there were so few people walking downtown, and I thought, man, if the downtown ever picked up, this really needs to be addressed. So, but what I found a lot was just ignorance. A lot of people just had no clue what it was, who he was, how it got there, what it represented. Nobody bothered to inform themselves. Nobody cared. But since I was informed, and clearly other people were informed, right? Because I found information online, it was easy enough to search for. I thought something needs to be done about it. And so I got together with a friend of mine, and we started doing some more research. That summer, we went to the Mouton house, asked some questions there about the Mouton family. I realized that, I was, picking a fight with a tiger because this family was still around and still very powerful and prominent in the town. But it really wasn't about the Mouton family, and I want to stress that. It's the struggle to move that statue was never about disrespecting the Moutons. History's history, there's a lot that could be said, but, the Mouton family has contributed to the growth of the city in so many ways. And it is nothing about the current Mouton, certainly. It's just about the circumstances under which the statue came up and the reason it came up.
Well, let's get that history straight,
Yeah.
Frank. All right, so correct me where I'm wrong, okay? So the Civil War passes. You have some, let's see, ended in, say, 64. So now 1920-ish. The Daughters of the Confederacy gets this campaign going. Right when Jim Crow is in place and
Plessy
about
Ferguson was, about 20 years earlier, but basically you have established in the South now a segregated society. Yeah.
Yeah. So the South was trying to say
Well, the daughters.
the daughters were, and so what I don't get is that, man, to get a group of people together to put a program as big as the Just Cause and to erect these statues and put in contracts with cities and different places to put up a Confederate statue to basically say, hey, we're here, we're not changing, this is what it's going to be.
Yeah.
That was, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think at the time when it came up, I think the exact year was 1922, that was a well-established belief system in the South. When they had a big old party when they put it up, they had... I read the newspaper accounts from that day. They had music, playing Dixie, gave speeches about the white race. They were unashamedly, segregationists, I would say racist, and celebrating the Confederacy and the Lost Cause movement. And it was at a time when, the South had managed to roll back a lot of the gains of the post-Civil War era and the Reconstruction era. And so that's why, when Move the Mindset got involved, we didn't call it a Confederate statue anymore. We called it a Jim Crow statue.
I think that's a great
because
name.
that's what it is. The daughters were savvy. They actually erected statues like that all throughout the South. And they had kind of a program, It's like they had like a handbook they follow, And they would find, if they could, they'd find some local hero who served in the Confederacy, right, who died in the war, and then they would use that person as the face of their cause. And so that they were so tied, that's how they were able to tie into the communities, right? And so here in this case, they chose a local Civil War hero who died in battle, General Alfred Mouton, who represented a powerful family in the area, right?
And they glorified it.
And glorified it, right? But it was really not about Mouton. It wasn't even so much about the Confederacy. It was really about 1922.
And the way of life
and the politics then, yes.
And the
that's
way of
what
life
it was.
they wanted to
Correct.
hold.
Exactly. The symbolism is very deep there, and it took us a while to unravel it. And, so we moved quickly to try to bring this issue to the City Hall. And this was before Move the Mindset was created. So I'd say about 6 months later, 6 months after I discovered the statue, we managed to get enough support to get a resolution before City Hall. This is in February 2016. And it was packed that night. I mean, it was so packed.
Y'all had some opposition.
Yes, and that's part of why it was packed. So there was a group that formed called Save Our Statue, and they had a lot of local prominent people supporting them, lawyers, doctors, that kind of thing. And a lot of them came out to speak. I remember there were 34 people who signed up to speak that night on this issue, and half of them were in favor of moving the statue and half of them were opposed.
This is 2020?
2016.
Oh, 2016.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, every single one of the people who spoke against moving the statue all said the same thing. They said that, we were disrespecting the Mouton family, which wasn't the case. It wasn't a personal thing. They said there was no problem with racism in the city. None at all. The statue, they said we were erasing history, that if we take the statue down, we're never going to learn from the statue, whatever it is we're supposed to learn from the statue. And they called us the racists, over and over again.
So what in your opinion, just your opinion, what is the attachment? What is the attachment to the people who oppose anything offensive coming down, be it a flag, a statue, or whatever? You had to think about it during this whole process. What do you think the attachment of Southern people opposing it? It's not a damn statue, bro.
Right.
Okay, come on. This is
Right.
true Brew Bobcast. It's not. It's not the statue. What is it?
Look, I can't speak for other people. I can only speculate. I'm sure from trying to sort of understand, particularly the Southern mindset, I know there's like this ongoing grievance about the North, and there's an element of that. But I think it's just part of their culture, that this is, this happened, this is who we are, and some things were unfortunate, but we don't want to throw it all out, and there's this sense of like outrage because their culture is being called to question, and I guess, what I wanted to, my retort would be, there's so much more you have to offer that's so much better than that, my ancestors did some horrible things too, and it's okay to admit that, just to say, well, there's the good and there's the bad. And in this case, this was the bad stuff, and this was the stuff that, you don't necessarily have to atone for, but at least acknowledge. And I think there's this sort of willful blindness to anything wrong that our ancestors or even our family, our parents, we have done, right? There's this kind of defense, like, no, denial, everything is good here. If you make a stink, then you're the one causing the problem. And we see it today in politics, with the anti-wokeism, right? Well, everything is woke and woke is horrible. Well, sometimes woke is pointing out some stuff that's uncomfortable and we need to deal with, and not just make fun of it.
As a white Southern guy, okay, grew up around here, as an American, if you truly believe in freedom, then it's freedom and justice for all. And in my opinion, you can't go up to a microphone and say, I'm not racist as a white person. You can't even say that. You can't say, I'm not racist. The only person that can say that or determine or define that is the people that you're racist against. You know why it's offensive? You know why it's racist? Because our fellow black community says it is. That's reason enough, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Hey, our black community leaders and members say that statue's offensive. Not two people, the whole community. If they educate on what it is and how it got there and the whole daughters and all that stuff, well, then you know what? The city council needs to line up and figure out the political correct way to do it. It belongs in a museum or it belongs at Gettysburg somewhere.
And that was our position from the beginning. We never called to destroy it or whatever. We said let's move it someplace where it can be historically contextualized and people can actually learn from it.
And pay a ticket to go check it out and learn from it. But for it to be in a public setting.
And we suggested to the Mouton house that they take it,
They didn't want it?
It would just be moved a few blocks, and they did not want it.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's telling, perhaps.
At least when we asked them, they didn't want it. But I'm glad you said that. You ask the folks who are being victimized whether it's racist or not.
Exactly.
And that night in 2016, February, at City Hall, the majority of the people who came up to speak in favor of moving that statue were black residents who had grown up here, and they shared their stories of growing up a little boy or girl walking past that statue every day and what it meant to them. And
that breaks my heart. I tell you.
And that was the testament, and it was so hard to watch the defenders of the statue come up and just completely deny everything, all that experience, and say, there's nothing wrong with this statue, and if you take offense, then there's something wrong with you.
Well, it was part of a whitewashing program, and Dr. Phoebe Hayes explained that to me before. She said, I don't hate the dead people who did all of this. Well, she does hate them. She thinks they were just terrible, and I think most of us agree. But we didn't live in that place and time. We didn't. So we can't really speculate other than from a distant view, look in the rear view and says, man, that was a terrible piece of our history. You can go back to Genghis. You can go far. There was tons of terrible things. What she has issues with is today's people whitewashing history and the truth of it. Mm. And I think like the statue, for example, is a piece of that. You're keeping the just cause and you're keeping their campaign forward. And I think it's just time. If we're ever going to heal, we have to speak the truth, in my opinion. So let's start speaking the truth, the honest truth, and then we can deal with it and move on. And let's start respecting, we're all part of this community. So it's okay to change things and move it and rebuild and right or wrong. What's wrong with that?
And I think that's what we, when I say we, originally we had formed a group called Why Alfred, and that was the group that brought the issue to City Hall. And then after that, we formed Move the Mindset, which was a much larger and more successful group. And that was I would say that's what we tried to do, speak the truth. We were respectful. We wanted dialogue. We engaged. We never tried to be aggressive in any way. We tried to engage the community through outreach, discussion, education. We went to the city council, spoke with our council members. We spoke with the mayor, president. We tried to do things the way we thought things ought to be done. To advance the community together, right? And I think it paid off. I think
it sounds
by
like
being
it did.
patient and by being respectful and by engaging the community, we were able to see the day when that statue came down without any violence, without any conflict, and it was like a tidal wave. Eventually, we got everybody on board, and it just became an inevitability.
So, great name, by the way. I think even one of the Mouton family members helped y'all come up with Move the Mindset.
Yeah.
So
That's
and
right.
and
And that goes to show, we engaged even the Mouton family to get involved.
so what are we moving, and what mindset are we moving?
So if you're asking about Move the Mindset, I'm going to defer that to Ola Prejean, who is our current president.
Well,
And
what were
she's-
y'all trying to do?
With
at
the
the
statue?
I know the statue was one component, but not everything's
Our-
resolved
our-
when the statue
Yeah,
moves.
yeah. So
we have a
our-
lot of minds to move, right?
Our mission is to address racial and social justice issues in this community. That's our mission.
Okay. Well, hopefully I can get Miss Ola on the show one day.
Oh,
and
I
she
think
can-
she'll come. Yeah.
All right, I hope so. Man, Mr. Fred, he sounded like he was a phenomenal guy. I wish I could have met him.
He was.
He left us too soon, man.
Yeah, he did. And he, winning a civic award for a lifetime of serving the community in so many ways. And after he passed, I didn't know half of what he had done until after he passed. And then, we were putting together a kind of a eulogy for him, and I was so just shocked by how much he had achieved. And I knew he had gone to D.C. to hear Martin Luther King give the "I Have a Dream" speech, and I knew he had done some historic things in his life. But man, he had done so much, building co-ops in the state. He had a lot of state positions. He helped build the neighborhood associations in Lafayette. Just so much, on and on and on. Contributed so much to the community, and just knew so many people. So many people respected him. He was tough as nails. I'll say that, and it wasn't always easy to collaborate with him. But I felt with him as a leader, I never felt like we were in bad hands. He was just so laser focused on.
Oh, he was a
moving us
sledgehammer
forward.
too, man. I
Yeah,
loved it. And
yeah.
sometimes you need to do that.
Yeah,
But he was an eloquent guy.
Very
so,
eloquent
So
speaker.
so is Miss
Yes.
Ola, by the way, from what I
oh
see.
yeah, well,
And a shout out to Dr. Rick Swanson. Did I say his name right? I mean,
did.
I
You did.
I saw his video, and man, he did a lot of research, and his presentation just, and I encourage anybody to get on YouTube, look up Move the Mindset, Dr. Rick Swanson. He methodically breaks down the history of Vermilionville, Lafayette area, and from slave owners, not trying to rub anybody's nose into anything. I think goes back to Miss Phoebe Hayes. He's just trying to correct history on what it is. And what a great starting point. I mean, he was unbiased. He was matter-of-factly about it, very scientific piece. But you can watch it 5 times and get something new out of it. And I would love to meet and visit with him one day. But if you're from here and you're interested in just making yourself more knowledgeable about the history of our community, go to that today. And I think that had to be a component of it moving, huh?
absolutely. Rick did some incredible research and was able to present it clearly in a digestible way. A big part of how we went about doing things, besides the lawsuit, which I can talk about why that was necessary in a minute, but the main way we went about doing this campaign was by educating the community. It's a funny thing. People say, our detractors say, oh, we're erasing history. Actually, that statue covered up so much history. people did not know the history. As you're saying, Rick Swanson's research really unearthed a lot of the true history of the community. And as he helped us to educate the community, through these presentations, a lot of eyes opened and a lot of hearts were moved. And that's really how we were able to get to where we eventually got and remove it.
My kids at 16, my daughter in 2016, I think it was her, but they was taking General Lee down, I believe, at the time, or they was talking about it. And same thing, old relic. You poll people on the street, it's some dude on a horse, But this is how I answered it. She said, "Who's this general?" I said, "That's probably one of the best generals, most talented generals in U.S. history. That's General Lee. And he's sitting on that horse and defiantly looking towards the north." And I said, he went to West Point. He was just very well known, and he led the Confederacy. And I said, so he had to be tough to beat. But Ulysses S. Grant and the other half of this country knew that slavery was wrong. They knew that what they were doing down here was wrong. And they came down here on their turf and they defeated that great general on that horse. And you got to know something. They were defeated. Evil was defeated. Mm-hmm. And so sons of the South need to say it. You can't glorify it like we didn't, like we got another chance or something. In my opinion, we rightfully lost and freed human beings to go live their life and prosper. That's right. So that's how I like to answer those questions on who are these generals with statues. Yes, they were put up there not for that story, but that is my way to contribute to the history and the truth of it. You were defeated, and we're part of the United States of America, and everyone has an opportunity to live free. That's right. You know what I can't get past, though, is even going back to 1860. How did they weaponize and motivate young people to go fight the worst war, hand-to-hand combat, over slavery? That had to be some serious propaganda action there for, people in the country, people to take up arms to go fight for something that I know a bigger percentage of people own slaves, according to Dr. Rick, but man, that's a big commitment.
Yeah, I'm not a historian of that period, and I know that that history is complicated, right? It wasn't just about freeing the slaves as far as the northern perspective, and they also wanted to keep the Union together. And there was definitely opposition to being drafted to go fight and so on. And in the South, I'm sure there was also conscription happening and poor whites being forced to go to the front who didn't want to. War is nasty. War is nasty.
Yeah.
And there was all kind of foreign intrigue happening as well. The British and the French trying to get in and claw their way in, and making deals and betraying, one or both sides. So it's a complicated situation. But in the end, I think the best outcome happened, and that is that, half the population of the South was liberated. And that's important. And we celebrate that today with Juneteenth. And that's a big thing that big part of what Move the Mindset does is every year we have our Juneteenth commemoration to celebrate that. And we work with the Southwest Louisiana Committee on that to be part of that program, and that's growing in this area, and that's wonderful. That is a wonderful thing that we have in this area, the consciousness around Juneteenth and the importance of it, and it's now a national holiday because you're not a free country if half your population's in chains. That's just hypocrisy.
Um, so your experience with move the mindset, how does it change you as an individual? I mean, do you have more hope now? Do you see do you what do you see in front of us as a community here in Acadiana?
Oof. Um, hmm. You know, I think for me, what it did was immediately put down some roots for me. I know more about the history of Lafayette Parish than I do about my own hometown and my state, my home state of New Jersey. And that's sad to say, but, you know, I've always been drawn to political struggles of various kinds, movements, causes, stuff like that, more national level movements. But this was a local
Yeah.
movement and a local cause. And so it got me in touch with lots of folks from this area that I would never have met. I mean, all the people you were telling me about earlier, people who'd been on the show and stuff like that. I know those people. Some of them I know really well, and I would never have met them if not for getting involved with Move the Mindset and just local um, movements for change.
Well, I applaud y'all, and I hope the next chapter of Move the Mindset, comes up with creative ways. Do you think there's a riptide or a timeline where you think racism, as we think of it and know it from a Jim Crow standpoint, is going to die out? Is that anybody over 50 or 60, or what age do you think is there that we waiting this thing out for?
Just waiting
I
it
know
out.
I know this. I would like to think my age group, and I'm 60, just turned 61 years old. Of course there was racism around. You look back now, I didn't think there was any, but of course there was. Um, but I do know my children is defenders of any type of racism, and I think the majority of their friends and all around are there. I mean,
Yeah,
any type, it's reactive,
right.
and so of course you're taught a lot of these things. Not it's just not a white thing; it's a anybody thing, but it's mostly a white thing. It is. It's mostly Caucasians in this area that have a certain viewpoint, but I see it. I'm way more optimistic for people for sure under 40.
That's a great question. I'm not even going to pretend to have a crystal ball on that one. But I will add this. I think that there are factors that are contributing to the reproduction of racist ideas in our society. In other words, it's not just that it's like something lingering from the past. And if we just wait for the old folks to die out, it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are, for instance, we live in a very unequal society, right? Extreme, and we probably have levels of inequality that rival, you know, uh, the Gilded Age, right? The decade before the Depression. Um, and I think when you have that much inequality in your nation, it it kind of requires a certain amount of social conflict to mediate that, right? And so we're seeing it today with and politically with all of this anti-immigrant, fervor. Blame the immigrants. It's always the immigrants, right? Well, last I checked, somebody who maybe is able to, cross the border illegally, they don't have much money or power or influence. They're not the ones creating the deep problems of social inequality in this country. But they become a convenient scapegoat for that.
Talking point.
Correct. And so I think as long as we are willing to put up with the high degree of inequality in this country, racism will continue to have an instrumental function.
But let's zoom out a second.
Yeah.
And let's see if you agree with this. I think that if, depending, no matter what where you start off in this country from an economic standpoint, we're all born on third base minimal. When you compare it to the rest of the
Internationally,
world,
yeah.
and when you for the rest of the world, okay,
Right.
I think we're all born on third base. So I mean, I think it's important to start the conversation off with that. Okay, now when you start off on third base and from third base to home, I mean, I think most people have an air conditioner and a refrigerator, and most people have access to school. Most people have access to some sort of health care or whatever, compared to other, you know. So, truth there, we have a wonderful country, and it has its challenges and flaws in front of us and some dark parts of history, all those things. But fundamentally, we're all on third base. Can we agree with that? Compared to the rest of the world.
I think we're better off than the rest of the world. Well, lots of the world, not all of the world, but yeah, I would agree that our first world problems aren't the same as third world problems.
Correct.
But even within that, there's vast inequality. I mean, when you
Correct.
got guys earning $100 billion a year,
Correct.
and the median income for a family of four is $55,000 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's massively unequal. And I do think that a lot of Americans struggle.
Yes.
We do. And I think that the anger that generates, when it's unresolved, it's easily co-opted and pointed in directions.
It's misdirected.
Correct.
And try to be specific for me. Where is it misdirected?
Well, I think it's misdirected at wokeism. It's misdirected at immigrants. It's misdirected at women. It's misdirected at the LGBTQ community right now. There are certain sanctioned targets currently in our society.
What is the root of the anger?
Oh, well,
That's what I think's misdirected.
I think that anger is a sense of powerlessness, unfairness.
But in one way, we can use all those words, but what's unfair? In other words, if we say, hey, look, we're taking down all these wars, we're taking down all this crazy spending, and we're going to raise, everybody gets a fundamental baseline $60,000 base salary. Every family in America.
Yeah.
What now? Where do we stand in regards to anger?
I would say people are angry because it's hard to keep up financially.
Okay,
Absolutely.
I believe that too.
I mean, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, I watched the RNC, and over the message was the inflation is crazy. Can't pay for my groceries. Can't pay for this. Can't pay for that. Mortgage rates are nuts. Rents are nuts. Wages have been stagnant for 50 years. The union movement was destroyed. Globalization, it was just a death knell to the American working class. And now we're seeing the Republican Party trying to sort of take over the mantle of the working class to say, we're for the working class. Well, you can't be both for the billionaires and the working class. And I think, they're able to do that because the Democratic Party hasn't really done that much for the working class in a while either. And so you've got the vast numbers of us are working class, whether you call yourself middle, lower, higher, whatever. We work for a living, and it's getting harder. It's getting harder. You got the gig economy. People are working 2 jobs. You've got mom and dad working, and that's if, you still have an intact family. And so it is a struggle, even though at least we have grocery stores and health insurance and things like that, but maybe, it's hard to, to get these basics met in other parts of the world. I don't compare myself to someone in Bangladesh, even though I know intellectually that I'm much better off than my counterpart there financially, right? But I'm still having to work 2 jobs to make
And that's
ends meet.
frustrating.
Correct.
And you're going to exhaust that frustration out. And in my opinion, you just made my case. That exhausts itself into some sort of racism or something.
Correct. There's this resentment, and then you need a target. And
You need a target, and then guess what? The politicians say, "I can rescue you from that."
Right.
You're right. It's that these people, this fault. Let me rescue you.
right.
And so I think fundamentally, if we both agree to that, then I think we need to rise up as citizens, not much different than you did with Move the Mindset, and not just you, of course, the Prejeans and everybody that helped with that campaign. I think we just need to outsmart the political powers and come together. When I grew up around Franklin, Louisiana, I can write down probably 7 or 8 different local banks, locally owned. People put their money in this bank, and people borrowed locally from that bank. There were just tons of clothing stores, grocery stores, hardware stores, the whole thing. And so in this short 40 years, Walmart comes in. If it got a big in front of it, big finance, big pharma, so all that's out of the way. Big oil, we reduced down to a handful of oil companies, big, big, big. And so where I'm disappointed with usually the left side, the Democrats, is that they usually put some pretty tight regulations on monopolies and people getting too big and protecting the middle class worker. And the Republicans, they just on the other side, those cats just want hedge fund people and everybody make as much money as they can and create the wealth gap that we have. What I say is, as a community, there's nothing stopping us from starting the local banks, shopping local, going to local restaurants, you can organically turn it all off if you're just self-aware of doing it. And I think by learning how to create wealth, teaching each other how to create wealth, and teaching and supporting each other, and it's easier now than any time, Frank. Right now you can start a business tomorrow and have stuff shipped and delivered and create services and all. We just need to support it. So I know I jumped on my soapbox there, but I wanted to make that point during this, that the laziest and easiest thing to do is blame it on your fellow, citizen. And I think it can be corrected. What's your thoughts?
I'm open to suggestions.
I hear you.
Yeah. I'm 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I would have given you my ready-made answer, but I think
it's complicated.
I think it is, but I will say this. We are living in an era in which our problems are no longer just local. They're no longer regional. They're no longer national even. They're global. We have global size problems, whether that's to do with economic problems or environmental problems or health problems. We just came through this global pandemic. Whether we like it or not, we're all on one planet.
Yes, correct.
And so even though we act locally, I think we have to think globally. We all share the same water, the same air, the same earth, and the fat cats have been really good at dividing us up with globalization. We're going to outsource over there. We're going to do this over here. Why do you think all these immigrants want to come here? They're fleeing from those policies.
Correct.
Right? So I think if we're going to have a sustainable future, sustainable financially, sustainable environmentally, and sustainable from a health perspective, physical and mental, I think we need to start reaching out and understanding our fellow citizens of the earth, and start embracing a variety of cultures, keeping our own, preserving our own, sharing that culture, but also being open to everyone else. The opposite is hatred, right? The opposite is the boogeyman. The opposite is conflict.
Yes.
And that plays into the hands of people who are already sitting on top, because war is profitable, right?
Yes.
And that's what I fear the most is the outbreak of another major war. You know, I see it. I see the battle lines being drawn. I see the sides teaming up, you know, internationally. I'm sure you've probably thought about it. And guess who's going to go fight those wars? It's not going to be, you know, somebody who's born with a silver spoon in their mouth. It's going to be the rest of us and our kids. And that's not a war we can survive, you know. And thankfully, we haven't seen another major war because sanity has prevailed so far. But it's a matter of time if we don't stop, you know, operating in the way we have operated as humans. And I think we need to. I feel, and that's why I support what you're doing here, Bob. Cafe Détente. I mean, what an excellent title. You know, a cessation of hostility through dialogue, right? And as you described,
pause and tension.
That's right. And what you described, you know, sort of sharing knowledge and sharing culture. And bringing together different communities. You mentioned to me the Hispanic community, the Laotian community. You know, too often I go to Acadian festivals and events, and I only see one culture represented there, but I know there are lots of other cultures within 20 miles of here that have so much to offer, and we need to have more of that embraced as well.
Yeah, and thank you for that. You know, the cafe, our purpose statement is a place to celebrate culture, share knowledge that will enrich us all. Be curious, a little Walt Whitman quote there. Be curious, not judgmental.
And you got your Walt Whitman-esque hat.
Got it on. You know, I think as I get older, fundamentally, we got caught up in this technology tornado. It's only going to get a lot worse with AI and all coming. And people just quit communicating. And I think Acadiana is like the OG of their community has the most diversity because this was the New World. They came to New Orleans, went a little bit west. We have so much thick culture. I mean, you mentioned Freetown earlier. I mean, just the story of the Creoles is way thicker than the story of the Acadians. And so my deal is let's celebrate culture. Let's bring the cultures in, and everybody come witness one out at a time, and maybe get some teaspoonfuls of knowledge, and like even moving the mindset. You're not going to write a book or get up and do a movie and change the mindset. In my opinion, it goes one teaspoon at a time. Just a little bit knowledge here and there. Hey, did you know this? I read a book the other day. A professor from UL, Yankee Autumn. You ever read it?
Mm-mm.
Okay, real quick. So, the Union swept through here real fast and moving on. They was chasing the rebels all over the place, and so the Union came. Like 30,000 troops in New Orleans, and they followed between Bayou Teche and the Gulf of Mexico. And they did a sweep. They started it was called Brashear City, Morgan City, and they just sort of followed the Bayou Teche, and it was going to go all the way and chase the Texans out. The Texans was giving them trouble. And so they got here to Vermilionville, okay? And, you know, the truth, we found out later that it was just a handful of rebels here with a bunch of cannons and making a bunch of noise and all that stuff because they had stopped them right there at the Vermilion River. Well, right there by the Pinhook Bridge right now was the original bridge. The Union troops had to cross that bridge to continue on. So they knew they had to take the bridge. So the rebels burned the bridge down, okay? And so I forgot the general's name, but they made their way to the river, and they had to cross. This group of engineers show up, okay, from behind the ranks. They put up the first pontoon bridge made out of rubber. And they had this big elaborate deal, this big air compressor deal that they did, and they blew the bridge up. They secured it, and the Army quickly passed over, and they ran them to Grand Coteau.
Wow.
Isn't that an amazing story?
Yeah.
You know
I knew they burned the bridge down. I didn't know about the pontoon
okay,
bridge.
what should be taught in around here? That whole group of engineers were African American.
No way. That's fantastic.
Every
Wow.
one of them.
Wow.
They saved Vermilionville.
That's
Or
incredible.
you see?
Yeah.
So, and that came from studies done by this professor who wrote the book. And I'm thinking, man, why isn't that told?
No.
Why isn't that told?
Yeah.
Did you know that?
No.
All right. That's a crazy
Well, then that's
story.
part of the whitewashing of history, right? That the
Yes.
contributions that African Americans have made to this region are eliminated. I mean, I remember a couple years ago there was a movement to change the Acadiana flag. Now, as I understand it, legally there's no such location as Acadiana. It's a kind of cultural phenomenon, right?
Right. 9 parishes or whatever.
Yeah, and so there's a flag representing it. It's sort of an unofficial flag, but the symbolism in the flag only represents the white cultures, the Spanish, the French. There's nothing there representing the West Africans, right? The African Americans.
The black and
There's
or
nothing
the
there
Creoles,
representing. Right. There's nothing there representing
the Chitimacha Indians.
the Native American. Correct. And so there was, someone decided, well, we should have a flag. We should change the flag. There should be full representation, And man, there was like an uproar about it. People were outraged. How dare you do that, But I thought it was actually in the spirit of that flag, because the flag tried to represent this mishmash of cultures, but it just left out those that weren't white, and intentionally so, I'm sure. And I think for the modern day, if we want to have an Acadiana that represents all of us, it should be that gumbo that has a symbol representing all the different communities. And that's something that'll stitch us together rather than divide us. And we need more of that.
Look, I agree with all that, and I think the generations that's coming up have to decide how they want their nation in Acadiana to look. And one thing for sure, we're all mortal, and so what once was, and look, I'm fundamentally conservative. I love tradition. I love our Constitution. I think it surely has its flaws, but fundamentally and policy-wise, I lean towards that way. When it comes to civil rights, I'm way on the other side. I just think that everybody, but it's up to them to determine. I think when people get frustrated, from my opinion, is I think they think there's a few antagonistic people trying to change. All right. So now we got 6 people want to take a statue down. We got this and that. I think when a movement comes like that, they need to be joined in arms to talk about it. Now, part about being civil is to go through the right channels, and I think it's slow moving, it's frustrating. It should be, in a lot of people's mind, move faster and quicker. But I think that exercise is to get everyone on board and, like, you move the mindset.
Right. Well, don't get me wrong. I mean, look, it took a civil war to end slavery, right? They weren't going to slowly convince the plantation owners to give up that system, But by 100 years later, I think the civil rights movement had the right position of let's try to non-violently yet firmly change the culture of this region, because injustice for some is injustice for all, right? And I think Move the Mindset is in the spirit of that. And thankfully, we live in better times where we don't have to face that level of aggression and violence as they did in the 60s and 70s. And, we just felt that this is the way that civil society changes. And I don't think there's a conflict between conservatism and change. You mentioned the Constitution. There's a reason why the constitutional system allows for amendments, because it is not a sacred text, right? It's not like the Almighty handed down, this written word that is never to be changed. I mean, that's not what the founders decided, right? They created a constitutional system that allowed for change, and the idea that history stops in 1776 is kind of ludicrous if you think about it, right? And so progress and tradition are connected, right? They're not opposed to each other. So I think if we can get through this tendency to want to draw a line and say, you're on that side, we're on this side, you're for change and we're for tradition, and just see that, no, actually, look, what they did in 1776, that was a departure from what was, even though, and at the same time, it also was rooted in what was, right? And things are complicated like that. And that's the nation that we are. And we're going to continue to change. I'm thinking, Stoicism, going back to like ancient Greek philosophy, right? You never step in the same river twice. I mean, it's kind of silly to say things will always be this way. I mean, the second you say it, is done, it's past.
That's correct.
So I think we respect tradition, and we're also open to the changes that must come. And yeah, you're right that folks tend to sort of vilify advocates for change and try to minimize and say, well, it's just a handful of troublemakers who are doing this, and they're from the outside. They're outsiders. They're not one of us, and this and that and the other. And maybe sometimes that is the case, but a lot of times it's not. And in this case, that wasn't so. In fact, we tapped a vein of of support for this that's been lingering for a long time. It's just people were afraid to come out and say the things that we said. But once we came together and said it,
correct,
the fear dissipated.
I think that's my point. When you see a unified effort, and again, that's why the cafe's here. We have to learn how to communicate with reason and not yell at each other. You need to have a dialogue of pros and cons, because our perception of the way something is may not be the counterpart, but together, as you talk about it, you'll figure it out. And so I think that it's real easy to text. It's real easy to throw a comment out there and just kind of, haters and all that stuff. And that gets you nowhere. You got to sit in front of somebody and have a conversation.
That's why I don't get involved in the internet debates.
Yeah,
I learned that my first day in a discussion board. By the end of that day, I was so worn out. I said, I'm never doing this again. I don't care what people say about me online. I'm not going to engage. I'm just going to let it be. Yeah, because really, you need to have that personal. Can it be like you said? Sit and talk with each other, with the goal is not to win the argument, but to win the person, right? So.
Well, when we talk about racism, and you got two white guys with a mic and a camera, you're like, but I think it's important for two white guys to have a conversation to move this thing. Of course, there's always a seat. And we want to hear that. We want to hear where we're going wrong, and we want to be coached up on that, and we're hoping they're open to listen to everyone's side. But in the end, we're all just sharing this wonderful country, zooming out this wonderful earth that we have. I love the fact, and this is often also, talked about, that's I think is misleading people. We talk about this democracy. We're not a democracy. We have a constitutional republic. It's not 51% tells the 49 what to do. It's the fact that 99%, that 1% is protected from that 99% through the Constitution. And so it's important that and that's where my conservative comes in. We have to put changes in there where that 1% or that 12% or that whatever percent is protected from this group of folks. And so it's important that our system works the best it can. But again, fundamentally, it comes from the civilians and the people that's talking about it. I have hope. I think these generations are coming up. What we're talking about, and we're thinking of racism and all that. I think the younger generations is so far past that. They are. In my opinion, what I see.
I agree. I think that on the whole, young people are more progressive, more open-minded. They are looking for answers. I feel like they're even more informed. Mm-hmm. And I think there's reason for hope, Bob.
I do. I think they're better than us. I think the way we were programmed when we were young and of course the generations ahead of us, they're products of how they were raised. We were all indoctrinated one way or another. And so you know what? Okay, we're living right now. We're living today. What are we doing today? So, I applaud that y'all group for taking General Mouton down, and hopefully found a nice place where people who appreciate history can go check him out and rub his statue. And I hope that we put something in its place that shows more unity and forward. And hey, it didn't just happen. Y'all took a lot of time and energy and effort. And thanks to Mr. Fred, Prejean.
Yeah. I mean, I think he poured his soul into that fight.
I know.
Yeah. But I wanted to, I guess, acknowledge, just to go back to the young people. You were saying you have hope about that. I think in a way, our generation wasn't perfect, but we helped pave the way for that. And I think they're building on that, and I think they have challenges that we haven't faced. One of the things that you wanted to talk about when we were corresponding was AI, right?
Yeah.
And in my profession, I deal with AI a lot. I help faculty get ready for that.
Well, let's prep the audience real quick. So you are a professor at UL.
No, I am not a professor there. Actually, I'm staff.
Okay.
I was a professor several years ago in Manhattan. When I moved here, I took on a position at UL Lafayette in the distance learning office. So I help support faculty to get trained and certified and professionally developed to teach online.
But you're on the front, and we're segueing now into a different subject. But you are plugged into the youth, the college.
Yeah, and I do continue to teach. I teach several sections online every semester. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so back to AI. It's coming fast, bro.
Yeah. So, and I feel like So here's one of these. It's sort of tradition and change at the same time, right? Because AI didn't come out of nowhere. In 2022, November 2022, OpenAI releases ChatGPT 3.5 to the public, and within 30 days, there's 1 million users, right?
Yep.
And the adoption rate is insane for this product. We've never seen this type of a technology adopted so quickly. But for decades, there'd been AI. I mean, whether it was machine learning, whether it was simpler forms of AI, we've had AI. Siri on your iPhone is a version of AI. It's just AI leveled up. And now it can do things it couldn't do before. And it was like magic, you know? People were talking to this. Some people were saying it was sentient. They lost their jobs over these things. And there was a panic that hit immediately. And the panic was that we'd all be displaced. Right? There would be no more work left because AI can now do everything. And in education, the panic was that students would stop learning, just cheat and have AI do everything for them. And then, at a global level, there was this panic like, Skynet was going to happen any day now, and the robots were taking over. Yeah. And I think we're kind of beyond the panic, and we're getting past the hype, and now we're learning to live with it. It's becoming normalized, and we're having to figure out how to live with it. And we're sort of in that post-hype phase 2 years later. So I help faculty navigate that transition, and to a lesser extent students as well. And I'm on the side of John Oliver. You know the comedian John Oliver?
Oh, yeah.
So, look, this thing was introduced. It's here. It's in the environment. It's not going away. It's like saying, let's turn back the clock and get rid of the steam engine. It ain't happening,
We just need to control it.
So what he says is, it's not that, it's not AI versus humans. It's humans who know how to use AI versus those who don't or refuse to, right? In the workspace, in the workplace, we know that companies are already requiring their employees to be proficient with AI on some level. This is, just the chatbots alone. They can write, pages and pages of content that's well written, good form, researched even. There are problems with bias and inaccuracy, hallucination, stuff like that. But on the whole, it's a powerful productivity tool, and it's not going away. And, I tell faculty all the time, don't spend your efforts trying to keep AI out of the classroom. A, you're going to fail. And B, you're doing your students a disservice because they're going to be expected, even required, to use this technology once they graduate. So find ways to introduce it, have policies on, fair use, ethical use. Even, I would spend some time teaching them how to use the most relevant tools for your discipline, because every software application, if it doesn't already include AI technology, it will in the next year, right? They're all rushed. There's like an arms race to integrate AI into everything. And so it's not like it's something over there that you go to. No, it's here in your face. It's built into your phone. It's built into Microsoft Word. It's built into even your appliances. And so there's no escaping it anymore unless you're going to go low tech and and live out in the country somewhere with no electricity. It's here. So we need to find a way to coexist with it and to leverage it. And I think it can do powerful things that can help us, whether that's in a political movement or in the economy, solve problems, find solutions to cancer and all kinds of things, right? And so it's already being applied in these ways. So I encourage our faculty to embrace it. Yeah, kind of get over the fear, introduce it to them, and have conversations about how to use it.
Frank, what excites me about AI with education, because that's the topic you're on right now, is so you got little Johnny and little Susie, they start in pre-K and first grade, okay? 10 years ago, little Johnny and Susie was going to go into the school system that I raised my kids with, and we was all raised in. You got your 6, 8 subjects. The class moves at a certain pace, and end of every year you have a grade and you move on. We all know that it just doesn't work that way. Susie might be a little bit more advanced. She's going to make all the good grades. Little Johnny might not have the home support. He might have ADD. He might have whatever. He's just behind. So by the time he's in fourth grade, little Susie's way ahead, and little Johnny didn't stack and learn what he was supposed to learn. I'm hoping AI goes where little Johnny's in his booth and there's this hologram teacher like yourself up there, and little Johnny's not going to move up until he actually knows the subject matter. And so when he gets out of first, second, third grade, he knows a lot more than what I learned when I was back in school. And so, and then the extra time they have left over, you can go into more of soft skill stuff
Yeah.
and different type of learning. I'm hoping that that happens and we turn out more educated folks.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're just at the cusp of exploring what it can do in education for students. But I can tell you, students are well aware of it and they use it on a daily basis.
So
Even my
is
kids
the
use it.
college system antiquated right now?
Every institution has some resistance to change, right? And it's because change is hard. I mean, so you got to relearn how to do things in a different way. You got to learn new technology. So, yeah, there are some ways in which the higher ed is still trying to catch up to some other
Man, there's
industries.
just a lot of talk
For
of,
sure.
of trying to quantify its value. I mean, there's a lot of talk
boy,
about.
that's a
Yeah.
that goes beyond AI. Look,
Well, but AI is coming to where, I mean, I can get anything I want to know that a college professor can teach me right here. Now, think tanks and probing and provoking thought and all those things at a young age is AI. I don't think will be able to do that.
I think you can get the content. You can get a lot of the content, although you have to be careful to vet it and make sure that it's accurate.
Yeah, that's
It kind of
true.
has the same problem that AI does. AI, it's garbage in, garbage out, and that's
Garbage
why AI has been criticized for generating content that's biased, racist, or just plain wrong. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Leonardo da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa in 1872. No, he was long dead. Right? But clearly, it got some bad data.
Yeah.
And that's what's possible when you're just on YouTube watching videos. You don't know how true this stuff is. You have no way to evaluate it. And that's where the value of having a teacher for thousands of years, that's why you have a teacher, because a teacher is somebody who's been through and learned and been able to discern what's true and what's not. But more so, I think it's what you get from higher education and from schooling in general is just developing the mindset and the soft skills to learn, right? That discipline to learn. That's something that employers talk about a lot. That's something that I think that's part of the value proposition of going to college. Now, what I learned most in college with my PhD, it wasn't British Romantic poetry or the study of. That's what my PhD's in, by the way. Yeah, great. I don't do that anymore, right? Clearly in my position, that's not something I am leveraging every day. But what did I actually learn through that PhD process? I learned how to learn. That's what I did. Now, do I have to periodically upgrade myself and learn new systems and techniques for learning? Because, the tools that were available to me in 2005 are very different from the tools that are available to me in almost 2025, right? So, yeah, I have to do a certain amount of catching up, but I learned how to learn. I learned the value of learning, and I have retrained myself many times over. I heard someone say, college isn't about preparing for the career of a lifetime. It's about preparing for a lifetime of careers. And that's just, an accommodation to the economy. Our economy today is so fast moving. Industries come and go, positions come and go, and they're antiquated within a few years. We can't even predict what jobs will be available tomorrow because they don't exist today. And so that's the struggle that our students have to deal with. And I think, our generation was probably one of the last generations that still believed this notion that we were going to get hired for life and then retire. That's the old way of thinking. But I think, millennials and on have embraced the reality that that's not the case, that they're going to be hopping from one position to the next, even inventing jobs. And part of that is because of technological unemployment, right? As technology like AI advances, we have less need for certain positions. And so, we're having to constantly reinvent the workplace and what counts as work, right? I mean, who would have paid for, I'm in a cafe today. 100 years ago, nobody would have paid to go drink fancy coffee in a cafe. It's just ridiculous. They would have just drank the coffee at home or maybe gone to a diner, and that's it. But now we're so specialized with all these boutique industries and businesses, and people are willing to spend that money to do that, and that's normalized. So it's just a very different economy, and it reflects the rapid change that we've all undergone. But the struggle is, how can we support ourselves in the midst of this rapid change? So the jobs that are replacing those old 9-to-5 lifetime jobs, they need to be able to provide the same amount of pay and benefits. And I think what they do have an advantage over the past is the satisfaction. Employees today are just as, if not more, interested in lifestyle factors, like balancing home and work, in finding enjoyment in what they do. These things are just as important to them as getting paid well and having benefits, right?
Well, I see that with my kids.
That wasn't the case,
That wasn't the case.
For my parents, they didn't care. They had a sort of Depression era mentality. If it paid the bills, great, I'm doing it, But today, people are looking for meaning and purpose in their work.
Well, and I agree with that. My children value that when they're just starting their careers and adulting and they're recruiting with those very balanced things, and I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. I mean, you sitting here at the end of your life, and you worked your butt off for somebody or something, and sometimes you missed it along the way. Going back to some of the comments you made, I like to see universities or even high schools spend much more time with the students that's coming up, understanding how to make themselves valuable. What like I have 350 employees. I get them coming in, and all of them sort of have that residual mentality from their parents of I'm gonna work real hard, I'm gonna show I'm loyal and effort and all that, and that still is great, no doubt. That carries a lot of weight. But they have to really, in my opinion, think of how it has to go back to what do they contribute to making money? Because they're going to be valued by any company on how can I directly tie you into revenue and making money? And a lot of people are misled because they don't understand the entrepreneurship, or they don't understand how to make money. They say, hey, I'm going to work hard. I'm giving you my time. I'm smart. Look at my grades. Look what I can do. When they should be wondering, how do I make money? And then when they do that, their value goes up and they're going to be paid accordingly. They don't care what you made in school. What they care is, how does that translate on making me money? I see a lot of C students doing way better than A students for the most part. Intellect has nothing to do with value in the workplace. Zero. It's how can you transform and put yourself in a position to make me more money, the company more money. And that sounds greedy from a business owner standpoint. I don't own my own business. I have own businesses, but I work for someone. But I teach my managers. None of my managers graduated in business. None of my managers went to school for anything, or related to P&L statements and financials and what, profits and loss. They were just fundamentally good people. They fundamentally wanted to do better. I taught them all that other stuff through, dashboards and all that. And eventually they start learning cause and effect and how to do it. Some of the best managers, I'll put them up against anybody that went to any school. They know how to make money. And their people underneath them know how to make money. And so I think that if we can help our children, it really goes back to racism. You know, you want to give minorities a leg up. Teach them how to make money. Teach them how to truly make money. Don't give them money to start a business. They might not know how to run a business. You have to teach them how to make money, and then they're going to figure that part out. And another comment I want to make on racism, and I know this because I'm older now, and I was fortunate to see a little bit of corporate America and business building and those kind of things. You know, the most bigotry I've ever seen, or the hardest I've ever seen human beings gone after, is white on white. It's a board meeting, a competitor, an individual coming in. They don't care what race you are. You're either taking a part of their business or they're not. And so I think that gets translated different too. If we want to help the society out, we should put things in place to teach people how to truly build wealth. And I think you'll see a lot of that stuff erode because with wealth comes power. With power comes everything else behind it. So I know it's complicated. It's all over the board. Again, I went on a rant there, but I just wanted to tie in some of our conversation.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to your question about what can higher ed do to increase its value to students, right? To young people who are considering going to college or not. Look, we've always had this belief in America that getting an education will entitle you to earn more money. And that's true. I mean,
It used to be true for sure.
Well, it's still true. Statistically, I've seen the numbers. Statistically, the median income for someone with a high school diploma is considerably less than somebody with a bachelor's or even an associate's, right? The more education you get,
It translates to
the
money.
higher income you can make. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't be like, a high school dropout and start a business and be a billionaire. I mean, that happens too. And I think our culture tends to latch onto that and to say, hey, anybody can make it. And then it kind of puts out this misleading message. And I actually think it creates a lot of guilt in people who don't make it. And the truth is the vast majority of us will fail to be billionaires. That's just what it is. So that's sort of an unattainable goal. It's not, the expectations are inaccurate. But for those of us who buy into the go to college mentality, right? Sort of, we're going to be on this treadmill, we're going to make some money. It is getting harder. And I think that kind of speaks to what you're saying, that it's not true anymore. But I think...
What's getting harder?
It is getting harder to, A, afford college, and then B, once you get out of it, to build that income, right? It is getting harder. We're seeing that we're a downwardly mobile society, right? Used to be that by the age of 30, your children will be making more money than you, and that was sort of how it was for a few generations. But actually, I'd say that's probably an historical irregularity, right? I think the sort of social mobility that Americans have come to be used to and to expect is really the outlier. And that was true for the 19th century, the 20th century, but not true for the 19th century. And it doesn't look like it's going to be true for the 21st century. but we still want to get back to that place where we see that kind of prosperity. At the same time, the cost of higher education has gone up. I mean, tremendously, right? So it's like economically, is that degree is not worth as much, but the cost of getting that degree is so astronomical. And so, of course, you have people saying, and that's because of just defunding of public higher ed.
Correct.
Right? The government, it used to be the baby boomers went to college for free. They didn't have crushing student loan debt. Now, an 18-year-old saying, well, do I want to take on $100,000 in debt and then roll the dice and see if I can, make a good income? Or maybe I'll just go into business for myself. I'll use one of these apps to, sell some service or whatever. Or maybe go to trade school, and I promote all of that. I think trade school is a wonderful pathway for people to make a good living. Be a carpenter, be a plumber, do something with your hands, be an auto mechanic. There are lots of options out there. I taught at a community college for many years. I think that's an exceptional pathway for people, and it's also a way you can later transition to a bachelor's if you choose to go that route. I wholeheartedly support education, but I also see the conundrum that our young people are facing, where they're having to choose between the possibility of being indebted for many decades.
Okay, I want to be honest here on the outside looking in. So, and you're correct. Defunding of the universities. There used to be people went to the university for research and all these things, and they just had a ton of money to do it. It looks as though that the universities just expanded its curriculums to include all of these different things that you can become for $60,000 to fund the universities. I mean, don't you think it's smarter for the universities to say, okay, let's go back to the STEMs group. Let's just stick to STEMs, and let's get our really smart people to turn out good doctors and engineers and all that stuff. And anyone who's not in the STEMs tunnel should take this secondary route.
You mean like separate the disciplines out? And
Well, when I think of universities back in, say, the 50s or whatever, I mean, there was very few liberal arts degrees, or there was very few like general business degrees, I got out in general business management or something. I don't even know if they had that. But if you needed to biology, chemistry, engineering, all of that stuff, that's your brightest of your bright. And college for other higher learning should be looked at different, because I think those are the ones who is questioning the value. Should I spend $100,000 to get a business degree, or should I take that money and go learn it here elsewhere in a different program?
Well, I think to be accurate, I think that the liberal arts have always been part of the American
and
university system. I mean, you go back to Harvard and Yale and their founding. I mean, they were teaching language courses, literature courses, all that stuff was there. In fact, the sciences were probably looked down upon as being more sort of working class or something, more like hands, like the way people looked at the trades.
Well, all right.
In the I can't remember what year it was, but there was a National Defense Act in the 50s that the U.S. passed when Sputnik went up, right? And the Cold War was sort of in its prime, and there was this fear that like the Soviets were going to surpass us in the sciences,
Right?
And so that the National Defense Act actually pumped a lot of money into the universities to create those STEM programs, right? Or at least to build them up and advance them. And so now there's been this big focus on STEM. And I think you're saying this because STEM, at least if you're going to go in those fields, like you can pay back the debt, right? You're going to make money. right? Whereas, is that
Well,
kind of why you're thinking it? Whereas,
I think it's more of a rigid learning. Like you're not going to change biology. You're not going to change chemistry.
those they have their
Okay,
upheavals, yeah.
you know what I mean? Well, in other words,
Um,
there's not a secret math or whatever. I mean, that's something you can build on to reach. Like you have to get so much math and physics to become a mechanical engineer.
but the reason they call it a university is because it's a universe of learning, right? You have all the disciplines there, and they're sort of commingling and co-fertilizing each other. And actually, a lot of the Ivies have moved towards allowing students to sort of unbundle these programs and create their own degrees, right? And you get the most unique and interesting perspectives when you have somebody blending, let's say, law with botany, and now they're coming up with discoveries that if you were just stuck within your narrow discipline, you would never have made.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I believe in that. I mean, anybody who went to college, it's awesome, blending and mixing all what you're saying. I think the issue at hand we're talking about is affordability.
Okay, so
I mean, you know what I'm talking. I mean,
let me talk about
if
where.
it was only $20,000 to go get 4 years of that, I would say everybody go.
So,
But dude, you can walk out with $100,000 of debt, man.
I agree, and
Yeah, I mean that's
and
the
I
issue.
did in grad school, so I know I felt it. you know.
Yeah.
Now, there are things that folks in higher ed are trying to do to reform the situation, and part of it's really urgent. Have you heard? So you know that the birth rates are declining, right?
Right.
And so in higher ed, there's this thing called the demographic cliff. So the demographic cliff is this projection that's been made that starting around 2025 to 27, we're going to see a sharp downturn in the number of 18-year-olds graduating high school. And so colleges are going to see their enrollments really start to decline very quickly. And that's going to cause, obviously, some kind of financial crisis. You're going to see a lot of them shut down.
China's gone through that a big time.
Yeah. So, So, and that was through their own policy, but just kind of like when you have an industrialized culture, the birth rate starts to decline. We see this industrialization. As nations get industrialized, eventually you start to see the culture shift and the birth rate go down, right? And so we're facing this. It's an existential crisis for higher ed. Everyone in higher ed is talking about it, and so they're looking for solutions to increase enrollments. And we're very conscious of the fact that one of the things that keeps people out is the cost. And so some of the things that we're talking about, well, one is making learning just more accessible and lowering the overhead. And I think online learning is part of that, right?
Yeah,
So that's
there
in
you
my
go.
field, right? It appeals to the adult learner, somebody who's working. Like your typical traditional learner is an 18-year-old graduating high school who's going to go live on campus and have that whole college experience. Well, most of us can't have that. Even a lot of 18-year-olds can't have that, right? And especially if you're working or have kids or whatever responsibilities, you can't have that. So the online learning is a good value proposition, especially if they take out all of those fees for all those campus activities you mentioned, right? That really boost the cost. Another factor, though, to sort of increase the value, and this is something that we've been talking about for a while in this industry, is why not diversify not just how you learn, right? Whether in face-to-face or online, but the kinds of degrees or credentials that we offer, right? So we're talking about, instead of having, you go to college, if it's a 4-year college, you're basically paying into this thing for 4 years so that 4 years later you can get some value out of it in the workplace. Like, it's kind of crazy to think that way, right? Like, delayed gratification, Americans aren't good at that. Well, what if you kind of unbundle the degree and you create what they're calling stackable credentials, right? So maybe like the first 10 credits or 15 credits and you get a certificate that is immediately recognizable in the workplace, right?
Like
and then,
associates and all that used to be.
Yeah, I guess associate to bachelor's it is, but that's like, okay, you get an associate's after 2 years, then 2 years later you get a bachelor's, right? If you're going full time. But no, something more often, it's kind of like along the lines of like, when I was teaching, I got into studying game design theories and then trying to reverse engineer my classroom to make it more engaging, because like kids will play video games forever, but they won't want to study. Why is that? Well, I feel like there's a lot of pedagogy that goes into good game design, and one of the things that good games do is they reward often. Let's give the students
Like merit badges almost?
No, I'm not talking about a merit badge. I'm talking about something that actually has value, right? So if students are earning a certificate along the way, like they take 3 courses in management and then they get a certificate that's recognized in the industry that can help them with a promotion or raise, right? But this is reimagining who the student is. The student isn't just some 18-year-old who's like full-time student. There's somebody who's got to
So
like
what you're
make a
saying
living.
is, all right, I'm a freshman and I take this new course that's out there and to incorporate AI or whatever. So I've learned, Word perfect, this, and I know how to do this on AI. I've shown competence in that. I passed the course.
Right.
Here's my certificate in that. So
So you
baseline.
get a certificate in AI literacy. Boom.
Okay, perfect.
Now you take that, you put it in your resume, maybe you try to go out and get a better job.
Yeah.
Show your employer the value that you actually bring to the table.
Right. So
And
that's
align
good,
those
yeah.
certificates to things that are valuable in the workplace,
Yeah, I
not
think
just
you're
like
on
some
something
bogus
there.
stuff.
You're on
So,
something there.
so that is not my idea, but that's something that's being promoted, is to create these stackable credentials where every few credits you're actually getting a valuable certificate that can help you in the workplace, with the idea that you're a working student. You're working your way through life, and you're going to college for now, and you may be going to college for a long time. We're lifelong learners, so let's make the whole thing valuable. Let's not assume somebody has the privilege or luxury to just learn for 4 years, get into a mountain of debt, and then finally figure out how to pay it back and get a job later. So I think that those efforts, that's helping. Just sort of taking a look at these degrees that we already offer and saying, well, which one of these are really relevant anymore? Which ones aren't, right?
I think I'm so glad you just said that.
I mean,
And
that's gotta
even
be part of
change it
too.
around to be, I mean, you have a lot of education in English, and I'm sure writing. I find the percentage of people who can just write a simple memo or a response to something or whatever. And what's more dangerous is this AI stuff that writes it for you. I think that's even a cheaper, plagiaristic way of going through life. I mean, it helps you. It's appealing to the reader and the eye. But what is it? Is that individual going to ever learn how to write if you let them plagiarize everything?
I got a different perspective on that.
What is it? I want to hear.
Well, actually, so they've done workplace studies on AI, right? And it is true. Actually, the employees, and this kind of goes to what you're suggesting, the employees who are benefiting most are the ones with the weaker writing skills. And so it's becoming kind of a leveler for those employees who have.
Kind of like using a calculator back in the day.
And I'm glad you said that, right? Because nobody today would say, hey, you're cheating if you use a calculator. Not a single person would say that.
No.
And that's what it's going to end up with AI, by the way.
Okay, so you think that parallels each other?
Exactly.
The calculator.
Absolutely. Or another analogy that's been made is the camera.
Or perhaps it'll help their writing skills get better when they see it.
I think it will,
in
and I'll tell you why. Because in order for the AI to output something that is useful and meets the needs of whatever the context is, you have to prompt it. In other words, you have to command it. So I think what AI is going to do is it is fundamentally shifting us to from an economy of doers to an economy of managers, right? Because now this tool can output a lot of the things that a person would have had to do.
You have to be a good prompter.
But and being a good prompter means giving clear instructions.
That's what I mean. Smart
Right?
question.
So if you think about it, as a manager, that's part of what you do. You have to give your employees clear instructions, right? And as a prompter, you have to do the same thing. You're telling this AI intelligence, this artificial intelligence, to perform a certain task. But in order for it to get it right, it has to think about things like, what are the requirements for that task? Is there a certain format it should follow? Are there certain examples that you can feed it? Give it a situation, right?
Okay, right there is where you need a really good college professor. So if I'm going to be proficient in prompting 101, AI can't teach you how to prompt itself.
No, it can't.
Okay, but how you just explained that to me, I can see that in a classroom to a 19-year-old.
Prompting 101. There you go.
Prompting 101, I got a certificate.
Boom.
So that is valuable.
Now, like, because the AI is not the same. Like, you use an AI and someone using AI who knows how to prompt well, and you see the output, radically different. And your employer is going to go, well, that what memorandum, whatever, that's garbage compared to this one, right?
Correct.
And it's an iterative process. It churns out, and then you say, okay, I like that, but can you change these things, and you finally get something good out.
And I see a classroom setting being the best place to understand and learn that right there.
Well, I'm hopeful that it does become a place as opposed to a place that tries to block it out. We had this, we did this webinar recently called AI Mythbusters. The Mythbusters series?
Mm-hmm.
So we decided to test 5 popular rumors about AI, and one of them was that you can keep AI out of your classroom. And one of my guys took that on, and he talked about AI detectors, which use AI. They use AI to detect AI, and when AI first hit the scene, the teachers they panicked, and these plagiarism companies like Turnitin, they rushed to get out an AI detector.
Yeah.
And everybody, it was kind of like a panacea. Everybody felt like this false sense of safety. Like now they could just like have their students turn in their work, and this software would tell them reliably that it was AI generated or not, and they didn't have to think about it, right? And that would just do all the work for them to block it out. Well, it turns out this stuff doesn't work. It generates false positives, false negatives. There are other apps out there that can help you disguise the AI writing.
But the data is going to catch up, and it's going to get better and better and better.
No. It's going to be the opposite, and they admit it.
Why is that?
Because they're hopelessly trying to chase a train they can't catch. Because the companies that are churning out the AI applications are much better funded.
Oh, no doubt.
Than the companies that are trying to detect them. And so their algorithms are always going to outpace their algorithms, if you want to look at it that way.
What's the big ones? It's Google and Meta and all the ones that are racing towards it.
And the thing is, you can't keep it out because now it's invasive. It's grown into the garden. It's not just a website that your kids stumble upon. It's built into Microsoft Word. So they're there writing their papers, as they always have done, in a word publisher, and they're typing away. And then all of a sudden, it recommends a whole paragraph of content for you because the AI is built in.
No doubt.
And so is it plagiarism now? I mean, our students have used Grammarly forever, which autocorrect is AI. It's just a weaker version of it.
When is intellectual property like a musician? When does that start rearing its ugly head? Because now they're going to get fighted out in the courts. Hey, you can't use that.
It is being fought in the courts, and right now, you cannot claim anything that AI creates as your own property. There's no copyright available for it. The federal government does not allow copyright for AI-generated content, okay? It used to be the same way for the camera. Photographers could never copyright their photos because it was assumed that the photo was a production of the camera, not of the photographer.
I see.
I think it's going to go the same way here. Eventually, it's ludicrous to think that if I take a photo, it's not my artwork. Clearly, like, a lot went into me staging that photo, right? And that's skill. Now, the fact that I needed to use this tool to actually produce it doesn't detract from the skill that I have as a photographer, right?
Correct.
So I think the same is going to be of AI, and it goes back to prompting, right? Without someone prompting this thing, it can't produce. Correct. Now, the day that it can prompt itself, okay, I understand. No human can claim that. But then we have bigger worries at that point, true sentience, right? But currently, if you can learn how to prompt this thing to produce, whether it's text or video or audio. By the way, AI can do much more than just text, right? My guy used it the other day, trained it on his voice, and now it sounds just like him.
That's
And
so scary.
You can have
man.
it say
That's
anything
scary.
you want in
Right.
his voice, and it's indistinguishable from him. We're playing around with text to video right now, where you can like tell it to make a video and feed it some samples of videos of yourself, and then it creates videos of you doing things. And now that's not as indistinguishable, but it's pretty good.
Man, isn't that gonna just create a lot of cynical
Well,
people, man?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, I mean,
I'm
deep fakes
already
and all that
cynical. I don't
stuff,
trust
yeah.
anything.
But what it's going to require is some people who really know how to use AI to help bust that stuff, and companies are going to be dying to hire those people.
And I think the universities should step up and vet AI content. In other words, say for example, UL or whatever group should say, this has the stamp of this. In other words, we had a group of human beings go through it, and this content is approved.
Possibly, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, USDA meat. Somebody has to say, hey, this is good content.
This is
Other than that, I'm going to be cynical and I'm
accurate,
not going to.
authentic.
Yeah.
Well, I think we just all have to become more savvy. We're living in this age of AI saturated content. It's already out there. AI videos, AI generated videos, AI generated images, all kinds of content. It's out there. And I think we have to learn to become more savvy as well as consumers of this stuff. I mean, my son, he's 11 years old, and he interacts with AI on a daily basis. He plays on this thing called Character AI, where he talks to an AI-generated personality, and that's just normal for him, right? And it's people are using AI for therapy. They're using it to practice relationships. They're using it in so many ways. Companies are using AI as a first line of customer service. That person you're talking to on the phone, that customer service rep, might be AI. The voices are that convincing.
Be interesting how the therapy sessions goes with our kids because our children, and mine's a little older than yours, they were the first generation to have a phone in middle school.
Right.
And so I think we need to really keep an eye on that and see.
It's runaway technology, yeah.
Well, is it messing with the human wiring?
It's changing us. Of course it is, but we created it.
I know, but
so
it's complicated.
Yeah.
It really is. But I hope we don't lose our souls. I hope we don't lose our human element. And I see other countries, Japan and different people struggling with things, and they, so. But anyway, you had mentioned something too, I read. Tell me a little bit about it, or coach me up on. You mentioned utopia type of something in some of the readings. What's that about?
So, I mentioned that I have a degree in literature, and one of my favorite genres to read is utopian and dystopian literature, right? Which is usually very engaged with the current political climate, right? And so imagining either how things might go horribly wrong in the case of a dystopia, or how things might be improved in the case of a utopia. And you mentioned cynicism today. Well, I remember being at a conference on utopian literature, and one of the panelists was talking about how we don't really see a lot of utopian novels written anymore, like in the traditional sense. Going back to like Thomas More. And the
Things are just
groundbreaking
moving too
utopia.
fast.
Well,
the
no,
world was a lot slower back then.
The 19th century was really the heyday of utopian novels. They were sort of like blueprints for change, how to create a better world. But since the 20th century, particularly after World War II, there's been this sort of deep cynicism, and people can't imagine a better world. That's the problem. And so you see 1984 and Brave New World and all these sort of dystopian novels start to take root, and that sort of takes over the genre. And there's just this pervasive sense of dread about the future. And now I think that started to change slowly. with Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower as an example, right? So she imagines this sort of post-apocalyptic United States, where it's just total breakdown of society. There's like slavery's returning through corporate slavery, and there's pandemics. There's all kinds of stuff happening. But you have a small group of people who have huddled together and are trying to create a better society where they are, right? So the local. And so you have this like little kernel of change, of hope, I should say. But it's always premised on decline. There has to be some complete breakdown. I think you can think of TV shows and movies recently where like everything has like gone to shit and now we're rebuilding. And that's where Utopia has gone to, instead of being extinguished, it's kind of like being preserved in these little communities of hope. That spirit of progress.
But I just have such a, yeah. No, I hear you. Thank you for telling me that.
But yeah, there's a pervasive cynicism about the potential to improve our lot as humanity. Whether it's the fear of AI or the fear of pandemics or the fear of environmental decline or the fear of racist wars or civil wars or fascism or whatever. There's a lot to worry about, and yet I feel like if we allow ourselves to get overwhelmed by those thoughts, that we're missing the potential that exists for change.
I'm in the camp of embracing change, and there's no set utopia. I mean, you mentioned when we first started the conversation. You have these billionaires and people struggling and this and that. So, I think I was listening to something the other day. It was like right after World War II. It was like a 20-year period from like 1950. 49 or 50 to right at 1973 is when the middle class, where one single parent can work and
Right.
everybody.
That was the American dream. The American
dream is only 25 years
That's
old. That's
exactly true.
And so why do we continue to chase an American dream that was 45 years ago?
Right.
And so we have to learn that change is inevitable, and we're constantly changing. And so, as soon as you set a utopia, you're setting yourself up for disappointment, right? It's gonna change,
sure.
man. I mean, it goes back to no man crosses the same river twice. It's not the same river, not the same man. And I can say that as I'm in my 60s, early 60s now, but. Brother, it changes.
I'm going to butcher Oscar Wilde, the poet Oscar Wilde, talking about defining what he saw as utopia.
Okay.
And he said utopia is like, it's like a horizon, As soon as you get there, you see there's more to go. So it's not a place. There's no...
It's a state of mind.
End point. It's about, it's the journey, right? It's if you think, what is progress? It's just keep going forward, right? And if it'd be great to think, well, one day it's all going to come to an end and we'll have solved every problem, and then we're going to just stay there. But that's not real, There's always more to discover, to learn. There's always going to be another challenge. So utopia is basically kind of an inspiration that keeps us going, right? It's like, and everyone's got a utopia, from the far right to the far left. We all have our vision of the good place, which is what utopia means. Whether we get there or not doesn't matter. The point is that we're impelled to continue pursuing it. And without that, I think we fall into despair. And that's the function of utopia. It's the desire for something better.
Yeah.
And I think young people have that today.
I think so too. I encourage everybody just to be self-aware of their energy. Mm-hmm. I'm a firm believer of that. I think that, if you're aware of positive energy, I totally believe that positive energy attracts positive energy and it creates more positive energy, as does negative energy. If you're negative and you're sitting in the corner and negative, 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 you're going to attract more negative energy and bad shit's going to happen to you. And so this thing's changing. The locomotive is speeding up with all this AI and all this craziness. And what I say is take a deep breath. I don't think the big bad wolf's at the door like everybody thinks. I think if everybody views each other just trying to be each other's best fan uh, throughout society, then the world will be a better place. And you create utopia one day at a time.
Well
I mean,
said.
I'm having fun right now. You?
Well, I think this is kind of a utopian project here, Bob. I mean, what you're doing here.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, when I first arrived here, I felt this place is different. You know,
Yeah.
this place exists outside of the world. You know, it's got a calmness to it. There's an intentionality here for sure. And I think having this conversation, I mean, you're a complete stranger to me, you know, but we're talking
First
about
time I
some
met
important
this
stuff.
cat.
And I see the potential here to bring people together.
Correct. And it's grassroots, it's small, but I think this is if we can pull it off, if I can get the right folks here and to participate, and I keep grinding at it, then it can be duplicated anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not a model that fits into capitalism, and is it a cafe? Is it it's sort of a
Right.
speakeasy feel, but we're going to see where it goes. I don't know where it's going to go. Well, man, I enjoyed this conversation,
Likewise.
and thank you for coming. And Dr. Frank Crocco, say your first name again.
Francesco.
Francesco, is that the coolest name in the world? Hey man, would you come back and do another one of these one
I'd be
day?
happy to, man. I'd be happy
Okay.
to, yeah.
And look, you run circles, your circles of people and friends. Help spread the good word.
I definitely will.
Okay.
I've got some people in mind to bring your way for some coffee and conversation.
Perfect.
All right.
Remember, join the app. We're back up and rocking and rolling here at the cafe. We have a lot of events coming up. We're making some improvements. We're going to have some veillées. We're going to really celebrate culture and try to get everybody to come by here. The veillées, you can look at it on our website. You see we have speakers for people from different walks of earth and different cultures, and they feeding us one teaspoon at a time, and we're just loving it. And that's it. Y'all stay tuned. Get the app. Get involved. Come by. Get a cup of coffee. And I hope you enjoyed the set. Thank you, Frank.